Okay. So, but we've got to share the microphones. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Baily. Thank you for that. That was a really educational experience. So if you haven't already seen the original video on this Nomad 101 in Dubai, we couldn't bring the boat up to full speed because the engines were brand new, not running. So that was our first opportunity. And we got to 21 knots, which is our sprint speed. But I'm probably more interested in talking about the speeds that most Aussie users are going to actually use this boat. So let's start at 15. What did we achieve?
Yeah, so 15 knots, the range of the vessel gives us about sort of 700 nautical mile working range.
Yep.
And we're burning, just under 500 litres an hour, all up, including generators. But it's just a really comfortable speed, and sort of 15 knots gets you, you're not at snail's pace and you're not at cheetah pace, but it just gives you a really good, comfortable speed.
Yeah. So we also went out into the ocean. We went through a few waves. I guess one of the consistent things that I already noticed in Dubai, it's the quietness of this vessel. She really doesn't carry any noise up from the engine bay, so that the experience for us up here is quite pleasurable. That was just one of my little takeaways.
Yeah, very little vibration, very little noise. Oversized fins on this vessel, so we had a sort of a 1 meter rolling swell, quite a large wave period coming through the heads there, and the boat doesn't really budge.
Yeah.
It's just an extremely comfortable boat for how tall it is and how short it is. So,
yeah. So from 15 knots, let's just go down from there. What did you have recorded?
15 knots, kind of like the next sort of cruising speed behind that's 12 knots. And at 12 knots, you were pushing closer to the sort of 800, 900 nautical mile range. And combined sort of fuel usage is almost half of 15 knots. So it's about 225 litres, all up a little bit more. And then you can take it back all the way sort of to 9 and 8 knots. And that's when you really see the range increase. So if you were going to do a sort of Australia to New Caledonia crossing, then that's the speed you'd be going at. It'd be sort of that 8 to 9 knots, and that gives you sort of like a working 1100, 1200 mile range, which gives you a couple hundred sort of mile range in reserve once you get to New Cal.
Okay, all right. We're obviously here on Sydney Harbour, about to start the Sydney Harbour sort of charter season. This is summer's about to kick off. But this boat is clearly going to be ideal for the milk run, which we were talking about before, which is the Whitsundays, and the Sydney summer season. What are some other charter opportunities? Would Tasmania be an option for this boat?
Definitely, yeah. She has the range and the ability to get to Tasmania. I mean, the way the boat's been built as well, it's kind of we've got a huge amount of refrigeration on board, cold storage, warm storage, dry storage as well. So we can be pretty self-efficient in Tasmania. Like if you go around to Burnie or somewhere around that sort of area, then we could be self-efficient for up sort of 8 days before having to resupply. We've got 2 huge water makers on board that combined make it 600 litres an hour, 3,500 litres of water capacity. For a small boat, it packs a huge amount of kit.
And I mean, it's just a beautiful place. So for those of you who are watching from outside of Australia, it's a little island just south of the mainland. I've only ever sailed there on a racing yacht in the Sydney to Hobart, but sailing in, going through the fog, and then you just see these beautiful big rocks just towering out of the water as you come into Hobart, and the clarity of the water, the number of beautiful beaches, and just there's not many people around.
It's
just a nice place.
It is. And you got the west coast of Tasmania where you got Strahan, which is probably like they call it like the oldest part of Australia. You got like all the Huon pine trees there, and the Strahan River, the Huon River, sorry. It's an untapped resource, and it's a place that you're probably the closest you feel to being in Jurassic Park.
You know what? You're right, because there's just untouched forests that are just the way they have always been, and hence why there's not many people there. But what a cool experience, and so many people are looking for the next exciting thing. They've done Europe enough times, and they're looking something unique. Well, that's that's certainly it, and that's something you could really achieve on this boat.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's really off the beaten track sort of stuff, but then you're not too far away from civilization, so to speak. So,
Yep.
it's only, you can jump on a private flight out of Melbourne,
Yep.
and be on the west coast of Tassie within sort of like 40 minutes. And then on the boat 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do some of the passages, which can be pretty rough to get there.
Yep.
You just fly in and fly out and experience the best parts of Tasmania. And then you've also got like the best seafood in the world, the best wine in the world, the best fresh water in the world.
And the air feels so clean.
It is, I could imagine sort of a better place. And then, a few hours from Sydney and an hour from Melbourne. Like, it's literally in our backyard.
100%. It's just if you fly to Tassie, I've only flown there once. The rest of the times I've gone by boat, but the air feels different. The sun's up later in the day. You're like, wow, this is a really different environment after the humidity of Sydney, and it's just what a great thing to do. So that was great. If you want to see more on this boat, guys, there's a walkthrough video we've done. We have done the other sea trial over in Dubai, but I'm interested about your business because you were involved in the construction of this actual boat. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, because I think many of you are going to get some value about perhaps contracting someone like yourself for your new build, because there's a lot more involved, and there seems to be a few people that are having a few hiccups along the way by just dealing with factories and not having someone representing them. So tell us what you've learnt along the way.
So Baily Marine Consulting was it was an idea that now we've put in place a year ago, but ex Super Yacht captain and build captain for working directly for owners building their yachts and the yacht that I would become the captain of. And we kind of found that in Australia there's a bit of a hole in the market for representation with like really experienced engineers and captains and crew who can work together to build boats to a really, really high standard for the owner. So I'm not saying that the yard are building substandard boats, but the owner can't be there through every day in every sort of section of the build, but Baily Marine Consulting can be. So we're the eyes and ears for the owner, making sure the owner's getting what they paid for, but also bringing that boat up to like a really, really high standard, so they're getting really good value out of what they're purchasing. And we're also assisting the yard to deliver to Australian standards. Australians kind of use their boats a little bit differently to the rest of the world. Just from like basic things like from the engineering side to refrigeration side to the way storage is used on board, water sports, and all those sorts of things. The way that that you might forget about when you're speccing a boat. And because we're there every day of the build, we can change things pretty quickly and easily. Like, we're actually sitting on a boat that we did the build of, and I'm staring at a wine fridge just across from us that we put in like towards the end of the build. We're like, well, there's no wine fridge on this level, and Australians love their wine, and we in the yard we had that built, and it's all the same veneers from the yard. It's like designed by the same designer, so it all fits the boat, instead of landing here in Australia and then trying to retrofit something as small as that would just cause a massive sort of issue within the running of the vessel, but also
100%. So interesting you talk about that, because my experience with selling boats, obviously a lot smaller boats, day boats, but we would have issues with communication because we're speaking English, they might be speaking Polish or French or German, and so things just get lost in the middle somewhere, and it would be so much cheaper and easier to fix these issues when they're found at the factory rather than fixing them with high costs to labour and parts that we don't actually necessarily have access to in Sydney, so we then have to bring them in. You just have the whole time and effort to fix things that could have been fixed at the source, which is essentially what you're doing.
Yeah, correct. And as it's factory fitted. It's all the same veneers. It's the same piping work. We get all the drawings from the factory added to the main drawings of the vessel. Helps with the resale, but also when the engineer is trying to problem solve issues on board, then we have all the original drawings from the factory. At the same time, at the factory, we're picking up multitude of defects, which would normally get caught here in Australia. And so then we have the ability to fix those defects in the factory under factory supervision. And we also have the ability to upgrade. Like, we might find an issue with an engineering system on board, and the yard might have an idea of how to fix that, and myself and my engineers might have an idea of how to fix that, and we work together, and normally we'll upgrade that sort of component. So the component becomes easier to service, easier to use, gives it a bit more longevity, and adds value to the boat because you've come up with a better way of doing it. And it shows in this boat. Like, this boat had multitude of sort of things that weren't thought out correctly, being hull number one, and we worked really closely with the yard to solve those problems within the yard, and now it's landed here. We haven't had any issues, to be honest. Like, it landed here in North Queensland, and we did a 1,200 mile sort of first trip, 1,200 miles from Townsville to Sydney, and we had no issues. Like, not one issue. And I don't think I've ever landed a boat in Australia and had no issues coming down the coast, and for 5 days, 1,200 nautical miles in all sorts of different conditions. And it just goes to show like how important it is to have sort of like a consultant like in the build.
So I agree with that 110%. So my background's different. It's as the salesman, and now as the YouTuber, I'm traveling all around the world, visiting all of these different factories that build boats. And what I pick up on, and even they say it to me, there's a lot of very talented, skilled people all around the world building these boats, but their skill set is the building. And they don't all have the skill set of the operating, and they will literally seek me out and ask for feedback on their designs. And I would say to them, why are you asking, I'm just Dan the YouTube guide in Sydney, what are you asking me about all these designs? And they'll say stuff like, you use boats way more than anyone at our factory does, which is, you're exactly the same. And it's the user's perspective combined with the builder's and the designer's perspective gets a better end result.
Yeah, the factories like it as well, because at the moment we've got 3 builds all around the world at the moment, and at 3 different yards, and we're open book. So when we're in a yard, the yard will be like, oh, where have you been the last week? Oh, we were just in Turkey in another yard. And they love going like, oh, what are they doing? Like, how are they doing it? And then we're like kind of sharing information between the yards to make both builds better. It's kind of sort of, it's a way of working together, but not under the radar. That's
so funny. Everyone's asking me the same, but I don't share any designs. I know your secrets are your secrets. That's not how I am, and I'm sure you're the same. Secrets are secrets.
No,
ideas are ideas.
It is, yeah. It's just like there's just like a very basic thing, like the way that we route water makers now are very different to what they were 5 years ago. To give positive pressure to the water maker, there's no need to bleed valves and all this sort of stuff anymore. And it's not it's more like it's an Idrima sort of design, but yards kind of miss out on that. So it's just a way of just sharing ways that boats are used better as well. Like I said before, like, Australians use their boats completely different to anyone else in the world, and if you're building in Italy, then they're building these boats to be used. Generally a boat that's built in Italy is only used for 4 or 5 months of the year. Here in Australia, we're using the boats 12 months a year because our season never ends. And there's a multitude of design changes that need to happen to allow that boat to operate for 12 months of a year. We're just sharing that information between all the yards and the owners to make sure that when they land here, that they're built to be used in Australian conditions.
Yeah, awesome. I think what you're doing is great. So where can people find you if they want to jump online and check out your website, because they might have an idea to talk to you about?
Yeah, it's just bailymarine.com.au.
Fantastic. Matt, appreciate that, mate. It's, I know we went off script a little bit there because this was supposed to be all about the 101, but we're driving up and down the harbour there, having a chat as we were whilst I was flying the drone. I thought this is really interesting and some information that needs to be shared with you guys. So thanks again, mate.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Cheers.